Hey everybody, welcome back to more Random Encounter. We are still in the triple digits. I don't know why why am I saying that? It's not going to change anytime soon, but we are creeping closer to episode 200, which is kind of exciting. I've been doing this for a while now since it kind of got foisted on me, which is kind of funny. It's been a good run so far. And we're going to keep on running with it. And the reason why we're running with it so smoothly is because I got over on my metaphorical right hand, Jono Logan on the mic.
Hey, instead of doing our 200th episode, why don't we just dump to like the 2000th episode? It could be like random 2000.
Just mess with everybody.
Like it was back in the early 21st century.
On my promise of still being 3.
Yeah, it was like every movie had 2000 after it. Random Encounter 2000.
Episode 20XX.
Then Random Encounter Advance, and then...
Yeah,
Super
exactly.
Random Encounter.
That's the only way we'll be able to beat Solosi is by cheating and fudging the numbers. You heard there the voice of John Tucker, who is back on the episode once again.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for coming back on, John. I mean, I know you haven't always been on the podcasts in the past, but you've been starting to be a more frequent flyer here with us, which I appreciate. And I don't know if that's just life schedule has lined up now, or you feel you have a good enough microphone, or the confidence of us saying you've got a smooth, buttery voice. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm glad you're on more.
Well, thank you. It's fun doing it. Just been back in the reviewing game a little bit more lately than I have been for a while.
Yeah, you've been on fire.
I think my last one was number 125 for RPG Fan.
Oh man,
that I've done. Yeah,
it's amazing.
And that right there is Zach Wilkerson, who hasn't been on for a little while, but we're glad to have you back, sir.
Hey, glad to be here.
And you've probably noticed around the site there's been some changes, and one major recent change as of this recording. I would like to say a shout out and congrats to Jono, who has been promoted to being in charge of our reviews department, because our fearless leader, Mike Salbato, has been trying to do that and everything else as he does. So it's nice to have someone step in to be able to take that off his plate. So yeah, congrats, Jono.
No problem. He's been doing a heck of a job the last few months, but that plus what we're about to talk about, the site, I understand it's been fairly stressful, and I'm delighted to take on the job. I have big ideas, and I've already started to abuse my authority, so.
It's true, he fired me. From at least from that department. No, I'm kidding. But it is funny that Jono is now the boss of me in one department, and then whereas he is the slave to me on the podcasts. Not really. It's pretty autocratic, really, here. Is that what I'm looking for? Socialist? I don't know. Anyways. Political terms. Throwing them out there like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, welcome to Politics at RPG Fan. We honestly don't know what we're talking about.
Roll pod political game. What? I don't know. Anyways, yes, the proverbial elephant in the room is that our website has been updated massively. I mean, I mentioned that in like the little kind of blurb last time, because our last episode came out as the site was launching, and yeah, it's a nice refresh. This is a new age for all of us here at the site.
The site looks great too. Much better functionality, way easier to find games now.
Yeah, that's nice. And the added author feature where you can see what everyone has contributed to on the site as well, which is really great to draw attention, I guess, to everyone's contributions much easier, because there's a lot of people who aren't as openly faces to RPG fans, so to speak, so it can be hard to find where they chime in here and there.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's always annoyed us as well as readers is having to, like, when you go to the front page and you see, oh, there's a review of something, you click into that link and it's like, no, this is a news story about the review. Click the link at the bottom to get to the actual review.
Oh, gosh.
Like, we didn't want to do that. We just, like, our old infrastructure didn't let us do anything else, and now we don't have to do that. Now when you click a link for a review, it takes you straight to the review. I think you guys know we're not about the clicks. We're not, trying to build up that ad revenue. So
I mean, John, you've been here longer than the three of us.
Yeah.
Like, so you've probably seen some iterations of the site. So, but this new change is definitely probably for the best in like every way, shape, and form, no doubt.
Oh yeah. And even in the past, every change that we've had has just been like somebody built a better tool to let us do the same thing in the same way. This is like it's just such a humongous change, and like you said, so many things that will make it easier for us to get content out there to everybody, and hopefully better for everybody who's trying to read as well. There's still some things that we're working on getting ported over. I think we only brought like the current year's news, and we'll bring over all the old news stories and things. And I know they're still working on getting older galleries for stuff, and a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But
because I don't think we want to do the whole. So here's the archive, takes you to the old clunky site. Have
yeah,
fun.
no, we don't want to do that. That's not
putting
fun
in the
for
extra
anyone.
That's one of the reasons it took
Yeah.
so long, really.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Zach, you've been, I mean, both you and Jono have been quite instrumental in helping with porting over all this stuff. But Zach, speaking to you directly as head of features, which, I mean, I don't know if we've had you on since you got that, but congrats, by the way, on that. You've
Thanks.
been doing a heck of a job running all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And I know features, at least on the old site, were also a pain and a heck of a build to do.
Oh, yeah.
So are you excited about, again, having this new functionality, this much more streamlined process with getting them out there?
To be honest with you, I'm excited that I could do it and I don't have to make Mike do it anymore. I mean, I always felt bad. Like every time we like ran a group feature, I was like, "Hey, Mike, here's this big pile of work now." And now, working in WordPress is just. I mean, I've been working in sort of the back end for probably 5 or 6 months with it now, and it's just so much. It's so much easier. I mean, even I can do it, and I am not great at computers, so.
At any rate, new site is pretty lovely, and I'm excited for all of us having, just so much more functionality, both in making use of it and in being able to post things to it.
Yeah, so come on to the site, take a look around, play around with the games. If you have a game that you particularly love, click on it, and you'll see everything we have for it. So every podcast it appeared on, all of the reviews, all of our media, some of which is hysterically funny because it's like 15, 20 years old.
One other thing to mention with the new site, just because we've heard it from a couple of folks out on social media and stuff. One of the features that we did have on the old site, but we don't currently have on the new site, was a page where you could click to, systems. So say what's all the PS4 reviews, what's all the Switch reviews.
Oh, right.
We don't have that yet, but we are planning to get that back. Just we don't have it right now. So.
Oh, we forgot the most important thing. There's a dark mode.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Super important.
Bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can't miss it. There's a little moon. Click on that, and you got a dark mode going for RPG fan.
Yeah, it looks slick as heck. Like the whole site. And I'm going to use that as a really clunky segue to go into something else that looks slick as heck. That would be Paper Mario, the Origami King.
All right.
Yeah, y'all buy that? We're going to let me go with it? Sure,
Yeah.
thanks. This is why I'm the
we'll
host.
allow it.
That's why they pay me the big bucks. But that came out July 17th, and you've been playing this lovely Nintendo gem. Have you not, John?
Yes, I have. I actually just finished it a couple days ago, and then I went back to do a little bit more so that I could get one more, completionist thing checked off the list. Yeah,
You
it's
monster.
I know, right? It's I was looking, using actually that same thing that you guys mentioned earlier. I went to my own page on the site to see what are all the Mario games I've reviewed before. This is number 6. It's not going to get the best score of all of the Mario games. That's going to stay Thousand Year Door. That's one of my all-time favorite
It's
games.
a hard one to beat.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not going to get the worst score of them either.
No, it's been reviewing well. It looks like all about the internet.
Yeah.
I like that there's one review site that gave it 100%.
That's a
That
little
seems generous.
Yeah. It's an odd mixture. I'm especially having loved Thousand Year Door as much as I did. I'm still sad that they've decided that Paper Mario is not going to be that kind of an RPG experience. And they've gone a different direction with it, but this one is definitely a lot sort of closer to that feel than some of the ones that we've had in between then and now. The battles are really weird, but they are turn-based and HP, and you get stronger as you go through the game. And you do have companions, not throughout the entire game. Through certain chapters of the game, you will have a companion with you, and they'll join in a fight. And if you don't manage to take out all your enemies in a turn, then they'll make an attack, and their attacks are usually pretty decent. So they're good companions, but they really kind of
That's a
are.
cool system.
Yeah, they're kind of more for out of combat things than they are for in combat things.
I guess that makes them more central to the story moments in a sense. Like, it's less about just having a party member for the sake of it. They're actually also important to that point in the story, justifying them being there. So it kind of raises their personal stakes.
Yeah, very much so. That's
nice.
Yeah, and having them only in that one part of the game lets the game be a little more targeted in that as well, where they know that the professor is going to be with you at this point because that's who your companion is this chapter. Nobody else. The one thing that was weird to me, I've always been a puzzle fan, and yet somehow I just never felt like I was good at the puzzles in Origami King, which is, I guess, the combat is very puzzle based. If you've seen screenshots or the videos at all, but the short version for anybody who hasn't is when you enter the sort of combat arena, you are in the middle of a set of concentric rings. I think there's 4 rings going out from you, and your enemies will be somewhere on them, and you'll get a set number of moves to twist and shift the rings in the right directions to make all of your enemies line up. And then if you do that successfully, you get a boost on the power of your attacks that turn. And if you don't, then not only do you not get the power boost, you don't have all your enemies in a nice line that you can jump on one after another. So you kind of get double penalized, which when I didn't do well at the puzzles was really aggravating. But I did find out that, like, at the very end of the game, I went back into a place. Oh, what's it called? I went back into a place in Toad Town, and I can't remember the name of it. It's got 2 big hammers out front. If you play the game, make sure to go back in there after the first time you go in, because when I went back in, they give you an item that lets you turn on a menu option to show you where the enemies are supposed to end up if you solve the puzzle correctly. It's an optional thing.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and if I had that throughout the game, I probably would have used it some. As it stands, when it came to normal battles, I just, I did however well I could. And then when it comes to boss battles, it's the same layout, but instead of trying to line up enemies, the boss is always just in the middle of the circle, and you start on the outside instead of starting on the inside like you do in normal fights. And you're given a set of arrows and different action tiles on the rings that you need to slide into a path that lets you do the thing you want to do. That might be getting right up next to them and hitting them with a normal attack, or it might be positioning yourself in the right spot to hit them with a special attack. Those, given the fact that you have a time limit on all the puzzles, including those, I mean, in my opinion, I just straight up cheated on those. I would take my phone, start the thing, take a picture of the way the rings were set up, hit the home button on my Switch, and then just stare at my phone, get out my stylus and draw things on my phone to try and figure out how I'm supposed to line these up.
I'm always a fan of using some kind of life hack to make an annoying part of an RPG easier.
Absolutely.
Captain Stapler over here.
Exactly.
But I think the moral of the story is, your enjoyment or lack thereof of those puzzles is going to drive a lot of your enjoyment of the combat in the game. But fortunately, a lot of the times, you don't have to fight a lot of people. So, yeah. Visually, it's got that great Paper Mario style. And as you go through the game, you're always rescuing toads who have gotten stuck in different places or who've gotten folded into various origami things. And as you rescue toads, you can sort of use those toad points, I think they call them, to unlock concept art back in the museum, which also looks really great. And so that's good. The music is really great. The the world is fun to move around and kind of solve the environmental type puzzles, and I think those who have been frustrated by some of the stuff in the more recent Paper Mario series as a whole, I think will appreciate the direction. Maybe like me, they'll still be sad that it's not Thousand Year Door 2, but
I think my only other question before we move on from this, if I may, is does anyone at any point say, fold it right there?
Oh, I really hope so. It does. If they did, it didn't stick with me, but they really need to have said that.
I mean, that game is pretty on point with its pun game usually, so I'm disappointed if someone didn't.
I just kind of feel like Paper Mario, it's like a hit band from the 70s, and they keep trying new things, but the audience is just like yelling out the old favorites they want. Like someone in the audience is like, "Thousand Year Door!"
Yes, as Bare Naked Ladies said,
me, or...
all you want is 1973.
And it's hard to, as everyone sees with any piece of media that has to walk in its own footsteps, because you're going to get so many people that are doing the whole, give us Thousand Year Door, and then they're like, cool, fine, we'll give you Thousand Year Door 2. There you go. And then there's going to be a good 40 to 60% of the audience are like, they didn't really iterate much. It's just like Thousand Year Door. They could have given us something new. And it's like, but this is what you wanted.
Oh, that's the internet for you.
Yep.
Yes. But yeah, thank you. Thanks, John, for giving us some love on that, and your review's probably going to be up sooner rather than later, so that's cool. And people get to see where you weigh in on it, where you draw the line, the paper thin line. I'm still not sorry. Anyways, getting away from this, Route 59 brought us Necrobarista. I don't know how anyone feels about having a side of soul in their coffee, but Necrobarista is all about that. We got that. It was on mobile first on July 17th, and then shortly after we got a Steam release. There's console ports coming up soon. And I was playing it a bit because Zach over here has a review coming for that game, and I'm playing it as well to grab some video coverage so we can have both coming out together. It's an experience. It's the most just pure visual novel that I've had the chance to experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I think by the time this posts, we'll have posted both the video review that you're working on and also my review. But one of the things I focus on in that, it's a visual novel, first of all. In terms of the premise, it takes place in a cafe in Melbourne, Australia. And the idea is that in that cafe, after you die, you have 24 hours to then sort of figure out your life in that spot before you move on to whatever comes after. And nobody knows what comes after because nobody in Necrobarista has seen it. And it focuses mostly on Maddie, who is the current owner of the cafe, and also another guy who used to own the cafe. You're not really sure why he doesn't own it anymore. And then you also have a player fill-in character named Cayenne, who just died at the beginning. So it's a visual novel in the purest sense of the word. There's no real choice in it. As you go throughout it, most visual novels nowadays, they're going to give you multiple branching paths and all these different things. And Necrobarista isn't interested in any of that. It's telling a very linear story, even for a visual novel, from front to back. And the thing that sticks out to me about it is, first of all, the art style is just unbelievable. I mean, it's this anime inspired 3D.
It's really cool
models. And the thing that I really love about it is that it's so cinematic. There's not explosions in it. There's not loud bangs. They pay attention to composition.
Yeah, the cinematography, so to speak.
Yeah, most video games are terrible at this. Necrobarista is not. And it does just incredible work of using like sort of the moving visuals throughout to communicate the relationships between characters and to communicate mood. The music is amazing. And it's really like a subtly told story that's just about like the people there. Like it doesn't really veer off into like sort of like the world building is there, but it's really not about that. It's about the people. And I think it's philosophically like a really beautiful game. And just it's also just beautiful to look at. It's beautiful to listen to. I'm not usually a huge fan of visual novels, but man, I'm glad I played this one.
It's been a really wonderful, calming experience. Like, again, I wasn't expecting it to be so heavily a visual novel. Like, I thought there'd be a little bit more gameplay as opposed to just kind of rolling through. I guess, for lack of a better term, it's like almost like an animated comic book for that, because it's not quite like you're playing through like an art house film, since there's not as much motion. All of it's very subtle and smooth and slow. Like you'll see a character like turn to leave and then it'll freeze until you decide to continue the scene, which threw me off at first. That took me a second to get used to when like the opening sequence starts up and I'm like, why is nothing happening? What is going on?
Yeah, that happened to me
and
too,
I had to,
actually.
like, click or hit enter, and then I was like, oh, it's me. I have to define when it moves on. Weird. Okay, cool. So now I define the pacing, and all right, neat. And I like that. But yeah, so I found it more akin to just, going through a very stylized, again, like literal visual novel. And like you said, the cinematography is stunning for it. I want to live in that cafe. Oh, yeah. The terminal is, amazing.
Yeah, one of the captions I used in my review for one of the photos was like, please, someone build this very cafe. There's like books everywhere, and there's like good drinks, like, of the alcoholic variety, and there's great coffee, and like I'm like, oh, like I want this place to exist in the world.
Billiards table, a glowing tree.
Yeah.
It's on a warehouse, so it's very industrial looking.
Yeah.
Plus, it's probably the first coffee house you've been in 6 months.
That's a true story, Jono. That's a true story, friend. Yeah. As a person who used to often work in coffee houses, yeah, it's a little hard, but I mean, there are some gameplay elements, which I think you talked about. Have you gotten to those yet, Greg? The gameplay moments?
Yes, I had. I'm about chapter 3, so I've gone through a few of those beats, which again threw me off when you get to kind of the, I guess, the mist portion, the first person.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it felt very much like that. Just both tonally, the lighting, it feels very much like my grievance with that, like where you get to move around the cafe and put those gameplay elements into effect after another element, which I'll let you speak to, though, is just like I find you move a bit too fast.
Oh,
I wish you got to like move around a bit more leisurely in the place, because I'm like, I want to take it in, but I'm like sprinting around the restaurant, it feels like, and so it's kind of hard to.
Yeah. I mean,
you're just kind of going, oh, I'm at the table. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I played it on Apple Arcade, so it means that I was able to flip back and forth between my laptop and my phone, and I mostly played the game on my phone just like the way it worked out.
Yeah, how does that work with touch controls?
Yeah, it's awful. The gameplay is really atrocious. Like the camera sensitivity is atrocious on a phone. Like navigating those areas is like really, really complex. And I guess sort of back up for a second. So what happens in Necrobarista is it's broken up into 10 different chapters, almost like 10 chapters of a novel or like 10 episodes of an anime. You can almost think of it that way. But between each chapter, what happens is like there are all these words that were highlighted during the previous chapter that you then have to pick from. And there are like different associations with those words. So like, for example, like if one word was used to describe Melbourne or the cafe or Maddie, that will be like what it's categorized as. And you pick 7 different words. And then what happens is you walk around the cafe and with very, very terrible controls. I mean, just genuinely one of the worst I've ever experienced.
It's good on the PC, I'll say. It's good. It works out with mouse and
it was
keyboard,
okay on my laptop, but I was using a touchpad and it wasn't great. Because like then you walk around an area of the cafe and like you select different items, and based on those different items, if you have like 3 words that are categorized in a certain way, then you can see like a little text side story about like that character or about Melbourne or whatever. And the side text stories are interesting in terms of like the ones I actually got to see, because like there's no way, because there's so many highlighted words. Like a lot of times you're picking from like 40. And so I would be left with like 7 that describe Maddie and like none that describe Melbourne or whatever. And so I couldn't unlock them. So I missed a lot of them. So it was frustrating. It was hard to find.
Yeah, I found that hard.
Yeah.
Because you think also because then you start, once you get the game aspect of the game, you're like, oh, okay, I think this is referring to that person. Oh, it's food, damn it.
Right, exactly. And like it's hard to find the objects sometimes, and especially on a phone, it's hard to select them and like move yourself to like, be in exactly the right spot to like be able to select them. And I think, and in fairness, I think Route 59 has patched some of this, like, and maybe like the version you played, Greg, had the patch installed for touch sensitivity, because that wasn't on Apple Arcade yet when I finished it, which was like a week and a half ago at this point.
Yeah, there is a way I can. I was looking through the menu, and they did have a control for how sensitive your mouse and stuff was, so I probably could make it a little less extreme. But again, for me, it was more I wanted to slow down the walking portion. Looking around, I like a highly sensitive mouse. I can see how that would be atrocious though with touchscreen, because you have a smaller field. And is it landscape?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, so that's better. You got more of a field, but yeah, that'd be frustrating.
Yeah, so I mean, like the gameplay elements I thought were all like universally just really bad. And so it's interesting because like when I reviewed it, I scored it like an 89 because the gameplay elements are so bad, but like they're pretty limited. Like you could really skip them entirely if you wanted to. And in fact, unless you're playing on like a PC, I might recommend you do that. Because the side stories are cool, but they're just like flavor. They're not nearly as compelling or as engaging as the normal story, and then you're not getting the thing that really works about Necrobarista, which is the visuals.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of lore.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of neat.
Yeah, it's fine, but you can mostly skip it. So like, but that to me, like that section was just atrocious. But like the rest of the game, like the story was so subtle, the characters are so engaging. And you haven't, in Greg, you haven't really gotten to the part that I think the second half of the game is where things get really engaging with the characters. Things start coming together. But it's really like subtly told. It's really funny without trying to be funny. Like I feel like a lot of games, like a lot of times to me, video game humor is just like not funny at all. Like I don't know. Like I don't really.
I find this game quite amusing. Yeah. It's well written.
Like I don't really like Paper Mario series that much, partially because I don't think it's funny when it's trying to be funny. Necrobarista is hilarious, but like it's just like part of like you can tell that it's just like part of the natural way that the characters would talk. But it's also about life and death. It's also about like why we do the things that we do, sort of the value of existence. And it's really subtle and really artful and really beautiful. And I like was crying like a baby at the end of the game. So that doesn't happen to me very often.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, in terms of visual novels, it takes the visual very seriously. It's beautiful. It sounds amazing. It has great characters. It's short. Like I think that if you're interested in good narratives, if you're interested in mood, because man, it sets a mood, man. Play this game. It's incredible. Really, it is.
I was gonna say that game is a mood.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it just feels like picking up a good book.
Yeah,
really, at the end of the day.
Yep.
Because you said like if you skip those gameplay elements, really all that is like the appendix, and you don't really need those. It just fills things out more, and it's a part of me likes it. The completionist in me wants to go through those and try and figure out again the gimmickiness of it, just to try and get more. So I do like that as a point of fact, and because it's interesting because the game, because it's so well written, because it's so cerebral, because the visuals and the music are so tie everything together so thematically, beautifully, and warmly and welcome.
I agree with that.
I'm like falling asleep in like a good way.
I can see that.
As I do with like a good book, because it just
Cozy.
lulls me. Yeah, exactly. It's just so cozy and lulling with everything about it that I'm just like, I can't stick to it too long. Otherwise, I'm like, my brain starts going like, let's take a nap now. We're so calm. We're so at peace. We're not thinking about anything else. And I'm like, no, focus. You need to stick to this.
You mentioned that, about all the characters. I think you said there's some world building, but the characters are really kind of, shine more. And it sounds like that's really fitting with the overall, sort of closeness of it, where not every game needs to be an epic world-spanning thing. It's a different experience, and that doesn't mean bad in any way.
No, I mean, to me, it makes it better. I mean, I think the story it's simple, but it's true. It's like really beautiful because it doesn't try to bite off more than it can chew. It just looks things that we all have to look at in the face, and it does them with a lot of subtlety and a lot of grace for its characters.
But yeah, you two gents. I mean, John, you had a few questions. Jono, is Necrobarista on your radar? I know you're a fan of the VNs.
Yes, I am. It has been on my radar for quite some time. Listening to you talk about it obviously makes me want to play it. The fact that it's short makes me want to play it. It's funny what you said about you gave it an editor's choice despite the fact that it didn't get like a 90, and I'm a big fan of that because I don't necessarily think our favorite games need to be the highest scoring games. To anyone who listens to this podcast knows I adore Yakuza. I've never given a Yakuza game more than an 85. I love them, but objectively when I play them, I can see what is wrong with them, what doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
But I still adore them. So I think that giving a game that you love that really, really hits you hard a editor's choice, regardless of its score, is the way to go.
Necrobarista is good, like a coffee, if you're into that. Which begs the question for everybody here: what's your go-to possible caffeinated beverage?
Usually like a caramel macchiato latte, like not like a real caramel macchiato latte, just like a caramel latte.
If I'm at a coffee shop, it's a chai latte every time. Just not a coffee guy.
I'm a tea guy. We have this really, really great tea shop in Toronto called Pippin's, which sounds like the most like stereotypical tea shop you've ever imagined. Just Pippin's. It's amazing tea, and I mean, Amanda and I just bought $400 worth of it, which is sitting over there. So yeah, tea. Love tea.
Yeah, I did the tea thing a little bit, and it wasn't until I like my second year in my relationship with Annette that I finally started to like have an appreciation for coffee, because she introduced me to like good coffee and well done cappuccinos and latte and such. So yeah, I like me a good latte, but it's gotta be dairy free because my guts don't like the dairy.
Fair enough.
Right, exactly. At any rate, to move along, another game that dropped around this whole summertime action would be Summer and Mara. It comes out of, again, another like one studio wonder with Chibig, who developed and published it. And it's interesting because a lot of it is they're building a whole world and universe, as it even literally says on their website. You know, they don't just build games, they're building a universe, because every game they have made is all set in the same universe, but they're all different styles of gameplay.
Ooh, I like that.
The last one they did before this is a game called Dayland, however you want to pronounce it, but it was kind of like a crafting, farming sort of sim, but I think there were some combat elements to it on like a little tiny planet, and a lot of those assets were like borrowed and brought over to this game, so you can see where they've kind of hit their stride and are making a mark for this is their style, this game, how it looks. And I don't know if anyone's checked it out when it was in Kickstarter or seen it since, but for me, like the visual presentation like struck me immediately, just for how vibrant and wonderful and summer that it is. That
It's a very pretty game.
yeah, I was very intrigued, and also it's a very Wind Waker game.
I wasn't going to say, but yeah, there's a couple of shots of the boat on the water.
Yeah, they're not shy about it. Like there's a few like very obvious nods in terms of how they've built the world, and I also think I feel like too they make one or two like more direct references to this is the kind of thing they're doing. It's interesting because the whole thing plays like Zelda, just without the combat. You're chasing around quests, trying to get X MacGuffin for X person to forward on to the next chain in the quests that will trigger somebody else's quests and whatnot. But at the same time, you can also go home to your home island and do some farming and craft some things to fulfill your quests, or farm some stuff that you can then craft into things for your quests, or you could just farm the whole time if you felt like it. Like it's a neat experience that meshes the two things quite well, because I find for anybody, mileage varies with farming sims, because it's usually, especially with how Harvest Moon / now Story of Seasons has put their stamp on that whole framework, that it's more about the relationships. And then you do the farming, then you go get gifts, get married, get to know the neighbors, and that kind of triggers the events. But that can, again, mileage varies with that. It's not always the most fun for everybody. And then they shake it up with like Rune Factory and now Stardew Valley, where there's some combat and mining and crafting and stuff like that. That kind of shakes up the dynamics. But ultimately, you're still coming down to progress to the next event by getting to know your neighbors. And that's kind of how you progress the game in terms of the actual like story, so to speak. Because you can just sit there and farm all you want, but if you're not actually getting to know anybody, you're not really going to progress the story.
Yeah, so it's very much in the mold of the Harvest Moon style. Get to know everyone, do chores for them. It sounds very relaxing.
It is, but yeah, what I'm getting to is it shakes that up in such a way because you have much more clear, tangible goals and quests. Because where the Harvest Moon, Rune Factory, that whole shebang can get you is you don't really know when you're going to trigger something with somebody. You don't know when you've gotten quote unquote enough friendship points with this character and this character to trigger this event. You may never, because you forget to keep talking to like ex-child, you will never trigger such important event with your romantic interest, for example. Whereas, you literally have like a quest list as you talk to everybody that says, this person needs this thing. Go get this thing. Go make this thing. Go to X place and do this thing. So it gets into this like quest grind routine that it simultaneously raises the stakes but keeps them very low, because really you can do them whenever you want, a la Legend of Zelda. Ganon's over there wielding his power and controlling the world, but if you want to chase cuckoos for 10 hours, you do that. And that's similar here. You don't need to progress the quests. And that's one of my biggest issues I found with the game, is because, like you said, it sounds relaxing, and it is. You're just doing this chilling out farming sim thing. You go sailing on the ocean, you catch some fish, you do some diving, you talk with the locals who really don't say much unless they have a quest. Otherwise, it's go away, I don't have anything for you. And then there's non-named NPCs that just kind of have like a pupple. I put pop-up and bubble together. How'd you like that? They have a pop-up bubble that just says, again, a canned something or other, and that never changes. So I felt there was some missed opportunity with like some of the world building in that regard, but otherwise everything's very interesting. But yeah, you have these people you can all talk to and do things for, but the pacing gets really muddled because you get into this quest grind that you're like, just one more quest, just one more quest, just one more quest, until you hit a roadblock because you haven't met the right person, you haven't progressed your quests far enough to get the item. Like there was somebody, I got to this point where I was doing really well, because there's also like a progress bar under each person in the quest thing. So you can, once I caught onto that, I was like, oh, I'm going to finish all the quests for this person. So it gives you this tangible goal, and that's very exciting. You want to do it because it's like a drug. And I hit this roadblock where he's like, I have to make this specific food recipe, but it needs pineapples. I, at this point, had gotten most of the map unlocked, had access to it because you get different tiers with your boat that lets you sail further and further out into the seas. None of the islands had pineapples for me. No one was selling me seeds for pineapples. I was like, where the heck am I going to get pineapples? And it was like hours of gameplay before I finally got pineapples to be able to make this one recipe, which is really funny. I kept meaning to chime in. I was obsessing over wanting pineapples for this thing so badly that my brain blurred reality in game, also because I was playing it so much for trying to get through for review, that when I was going shopping locally, I'd see pineapples and my brain would go, we should buy those. We need those. And I was like,
did you end up buying them?
I did not. Because I told my brain, no brain, you're being dumb. That's for a video game, not real life. I have a problem.
That's It'd be hysterically funny if you just arrived home and there was a pineapple sitting on the table.
What?
How did that get there?
Which is actually funny because there literally is a pineapple sitting inside like the picture when you go inside her home. I'm like, oh, there's one. I want that one. Anyways.
I was just mocking you the entire game.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, I know. I need the pineapple. Ugh.
The pineapple's a lie. But yeah, so you would frequently run into a lot of these roadblocks where you kind of like are bashing your head against the wall being like, where's the thing I need? Because you've gotten addicted to the gameplay loop. And I find that it was a bit of a struggle, but as I also mentioned this in my review, which I think ought to be out by the time this recording goes up, that also some people might not have this problem because they're not playing it at a reviewer's pace. So that need to get through it fast might not be there, but yes, it was. I think it took me roughly like 30 hours still to get through this game because it's a nice leisurely farming sim. on top of
Yeah.
the quest grind. And there's a lot of quests and everything to fulfill, and you basically have to do like everybody's quest to beat the game. I mean, I think there's a few you can kind of dodge by, but most quests have to be done in order to open up quests for somebody else that's important to progress the story to the next major overarching story beat.
It's interesting because it sounds like, obvious, I haven't played it yet. It sounds a little bit like all of the surrounding factors of, let's say, a Zelda game or an RPG, or like there's a farming mini game. There's, you can do all these side quests, but without the central mechanic of, well, battle, without fighting, without temples, without dungeons, that kind of thing. Is there
Exactly.
what ties all of this together into a cohesive whole, or does it?
And that's the other thing that kind of got me is, again, the story. It's very nice and heartwarming. Like, it's a very wholesome game. And the team is Spain based, so there is a few like English issues in the game, and like that people speak a bit too proper. Like, again, like the localization is very much like, this is how proper English is spoken. And not obviously everyone talks like that. Like, there's a certain tone that comes through some of the stuff, and that's helped by like, it has voice acting in the same vein as Legend of Zelda does, where it's just kind of like characterized tone that gives you a sense of the character. But yeah, the story itself, both through I think a bit of the localization and how stilted the English can come across, and because like you're doing all these quests all over, doesn't feel super cohesive. Like, you get a general idea of like, okay, I think this is what is going on, but I found it hard for that to matter. Like, again, that's where I say, while the stakes were high in a sense in terms of like the farming game aspect, because you had a quest to fulfill your farming duties for, at the same time it was extremely low because there was no really sense of urgency to fix anything to do for like the overarching story to like quote unquote save the world, even though you kind of end up going in a direction that it seems clear that you're going to have to help save the world, because the game is all about the balance of progress and conserving nature, being respectful to all living things in your world and such, in yourself, but also take your time, don't rush things, appreciate what you have, kind of thing. And that you get that general sense and tone from the story, but like otherwise the gameplay mechanics don't really meld towards fulfilling that. Like a quest in Legend of Zelda where like, yeah, you go to the dungeons because there's a boss causing havoc or whatever, whereas you're just going from person to person to person to find who's the person that's going to help me do the next thing I need to do to help the next person to do the next thing to help me do the next thing with the next person that'll help me do, So yeah, it struggles with cohesion with its story. Like, you end up going through it and going like, okay, that was a nice heartwarming tale, but it was so broken up by so and so just wanted to cook, so and so just wanted this thing, and generally most of the quests kind of feed into somebody else. Like, there's not to spoil too much, but there's two restaurateurs in like the hub town of Kalis, which is the next town or the next island over from yours. So you have your home island, and there's Kalis, which is like the only other island that has like anything of importance on it, and that's where you get all your quests because all the NPCs are there. And these two rival restaurateurs, it becomes clear that one of them's stressing himself out by overworking himself to try and get new customers, whereas the other one is a native to the planet and a native to the island, so he knows what the islanders want and is having more success, but he's a little stuck in his ways, and he has his nephew there who he's kind of beating down, and his nephew just wants to kind of strike out, do his own thing. And then your character Koa, she starts getting the bright idea of, well, why don't you two just work together instead of competing with each other and stepping on each other's business? It's clear he needs help because he's stressing out trying to keep up with you. You clearly could use help trying to shake up your menu, and so in the end you kind of help these two reconcile their ways, and whether they agree to disagree or work together, that kind of all gets figured out. So you kind of help that, but that's entirely adjacent to the overarching plot of like help out the planet. But you need to do those quests to unlock the other people who are their quests to help you further the main quest, right? So
yeah, I can see that.
So that's where it gets a little bit more closer to that traditional relationship building, which is nice. Again, it feels like you're helping, you're filling out the world, you're kind of playing through not quite a visual novel, but again, you're just playing through a story with like nice gameplay elements in between. So you'll get out of it what you want. And it's been, again, getting, I don't know, it seems like its average review is like an average game, and by most site standards. I'm fairly high on it because I like what it's trying to do. Gwen's been playing it a bit, and it seems pretty clear to her how to get around and do things. So it's not like overly complex, but we'll see how she does later, because I found there was a few things too that I think they could have been clearer about. Like, it took me a good portion of the game to realize that the quest menu directly feeds onto your menu, but you have to go through the quest menu first, because there's be characters who'll be like, oh, I need this specific fish. Here, I'll mark it on your map. And I was like, cool. And I open up my map, and there's nothing telling me anything anywhere. So I just ended up sailing around for a few hours trying to figure out where this might be. And there's a fast travel.
Because you didn't go to the quest map.
Exactly. If you go to your quest menu and go to the person's quest, and then you click on show it on the map, then it will show you an indicator saying this is where it is. But then again, if you access the map, there's no indicators on the map after the fact. So you have to go through it that way, which seems a little clunky and annoying. Maybe they were trying to keep the map decluttered. They didn't want to do a bunch of different like colored pointers per NPC or whatever. Like, I can think of reasons why not to, but it seemed a little counterintuitive and was frustrating to figure out because, yeah, like I said, I would be nebulously sailing around for hours hoping to find something. And like I was saying, there is fast travel in the game that they've introduced shortly after, I think, the release, but you have to pay for it. So early game, especially when you open up the first few islands, it's expensive enough as it is to try until you can really get your farm going and get more of the bigger items. Like, once you get pigs and can get truffles and stuff, you're really not banking a lot of money. You're banking just enough to buy more seeds to just flip it over and get the stuff you need to fulfill quests and whatnot. So having to also fork out, because it gets more expensive the further from like the main island you go, having to fork out money just to fast travel around to save yourself time, which I thought was really annoying. So I'm like, I would just go there anyway, so why are you making me pay for it? Like, this is a convenience, and I get maybe you feel like there's something lost if we abuse it, but it's like, if we feel like sailing, we'll sail, because there's incentive to sailing, because there's items in the water that you can bump into and you can get some free stuff that way. Eventually you can rescue farm animals that you'll find on the map in the seas and stuff like that. So there is a reason to just sail around. You can encounter some pirates who you can buy stuff from, and they can also trigger quests and stuff. So there's things to do. There's plenty of reasons why. So I don't understand why they felt the need to charge players for it. So
yeah, feels like a double penalty.
Exactly, right?
It seems like they're trying to disincentivize you to use fast travel, but it's still there as an option, and that just kind of creates this weird dissonance.
Well, exactly, and it's like the thing in Pokemon, right? You start early game, everything's hard financially. You know, especially in the latest one, you're not going to blow money on clothes. You're struggling just to get like the right like potions and antidotes and this and that. But then by the end of the game, you've broken the economy, and you're just like, yeah, whatever, I'll buy Pallet Town. And that's the same thing here. Eventually, you can get to a point where you can pretty much break the economy because you are banking in the right items. So then it becomes very much a non-issue, thankfully. But it just seems frustrating because, especially early game, you are constantly going back and forth between Kalis and your home island to craft things for these quests. They eventually introduce another little kitchen place on that island, and there's another little workshop, but they're not as useful, I guess, for lack of a better term, instead of just going back to your island and being able to do everything in one place and collect your ingredients and all that sort of stuff. So you are sailing back and forth a lot, regardless. A little bit more quality of life overhaul, and I think was one of the biggest things I pinged it for in terms of gameplay, because otherwise it's very fun and enjoyable. And like I said, the kind of story aside, it's still very wholesome and heartwarming. The characters are lovely. It's visually, it's outstanding. Like, all the character portraits emote really nicely when they're talking. My favorite point was you can unlock shirts and backpacks for Koa, and when she talks, her character portrait has changed, which is something I find most games overlook.
That's nice.
Yeah. Which I love, because she has a shirt that you can get from a tourist that says "I love Mara" on it. I heart Mara, in the vein of the I Heart New York ones. And when she's running around, she's wearing it on her model, but when she's in the conversations, she's suddenly wearing sunglasses. And then she has sunglasses on in, I guess, when she's running around too, so that shirt comes with sunglasses, and it just makes her the coolest, like, 9-year-old, nice. 10-year-old, whatever she is. So all of it is really well put together in a lot of ways in terms of so many ambitious systems. But yeah, like just those little quality of life things, like trying to sell an item is so like annoying if you're trying to do many of them, because it just the literal like ticking up is so slow, and there's no like jump it up by 10 kind of option or anything. So you're just sitting there, be like, I want to sell 99 truffles, but I'll be here for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that is annoying. And as I also mentioned in my review, I felt like as more of the islands started opening up, some of the systems started breaking down. Like I would frequently get like an odd pop-up that would come up that I couldn't get rid of unless I like managed to move myself or sell myself somewhere, and then it refreshed the screen. But it'd be really hard to see because it's blocking 90% of the screen. Ooh. Or there was one time I went to my home island and I couldn't dock because the game engine confused itself that it still thought I was in the open seas water. And when you're in the open seas, which you get a certain like vicinity away from the island, it is in the open seas and you can't jump out of your boat. So I wasn't able to actually like dock on my island, and I was confused. I'm like, is this a story thing? Like, am I just not allowed because of what's happening in the story, or is it broken?
Yeah, you really can't go home again.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. So it's like there's little things like that, little small obtuse things like that, like the quest menu, and that I feel like the game doesn't hold your hand, which is great, but there's some other stuff where like at least have like a library like in Harvest Moon that you could go to figure out how mechanics work, or just someone you can ask a question of. But every NPC is just programmed to be like, I either give you a quest or I tell you to bugger off, or I sell you stuff, one or the other, right? So it's, mileage may vary, but overall I'm still pretty high on it. I kept wanting to go back to it, so I knew there was something about it despite, you know, the quest grind and stuff like that. So I think like Gwen's only gotten through a bit of like the tutorial and into starting the game in earnest, and so far she's pretty keen on it as well. So it definitely will be a great play for her and a younger generation, because they may not be looking for the story to be as cohesive as necessary. They'll just kind of take it for the Saturday morning cartoon it kind of feels like.
Well, that's something I took from last week's episode, which really reminded me sometimes we're not the target audience of games. When Gwen was here and she was talking about Pokemon and Minecraft Dungeons, there was such an excitement about it that made me like, oh yeah, you know, sometimes Nintendo or like these other companies aren't making games for us or the reviewers or the hardcore people on Twitter. They're making games for younger kids who would really enjoy them.
Exactly, and they can see past the seams, you know. They may or may not question the fact that they walk into their mine and it's raining inside just like it is outside. It's weird. They might think it's funny. Maybe it's on purpose. They don't know. They may not notice the little bits of seams where they didn't throw some graphical assets or whatever, right? And how janky jumping sometimes is or whatever. And they're much more forgiving an audience, and that doesn't mean companies are cutting corners or whatever, but they're playing the game for fun. Like they're there for the simple pleasure of the fun. And if the game's fun, that's enough, and that's what it needs to be. And if, you know, there's plenty of us who can probably, you know, attest to a game that may not look the prettiest, may not sound the prettiest, but boy, was it fun. I just love what they've been creating with making this whole universe, this whole world. Like, I'm intrigued by it. As soon as I got to like the hub island and started learning like, oh, this is just a planet and there's people from different planets coming to this place like a vacation paradise. Oh, that's pretty neat. Okay, I'm on board with this. And then when I started looking into the company more and realizing that, yeah, they've had some games on other worlds. Some of these species have been in other games before, maybe not as central characters, but more central to the story and stuff like that. I thought that was super cool. So I'm excited to see if this keeps helping them carry this style of gameplay world, whatever, forward. Because I've always loved that idea of making a gameplay world and having different types of gameplay. Not everything needs to be an RPG in it. Not everything needs to be an action game. There's different ways to approach the world, and I think that's super cool. And so I really hope Chibe gets to do more of that. And Summer Mara, it's a decent hit so far, and I think it has set up a really great groundwork if they can keep building on. Like, it's clear that's what they wanted to do, because Dayland, like I said, kind of established what they were going for with this. Then they got really ambitious with this title. If they can refine these systems and perfect it for another Summer Mara 2 or a visit to another planet or whatever, like, they'll have a really great 3D crafting farming kind of exploration game on their hands.
Cool. I look forward to reading your review.
I'll throw out just for the my fellow Star Trek nerds. Yes, when he mentioned Kahless a bunch of times, I did try to make a Star Trek joke. The closest I could come up with was one about maybe the rules of acquisition, Risa or the Kobayashi Maru. None of them were good enough to actually make. Just know that somebody was thinking about it, not just you.
You should feel seen now. So yeah, on with the subject of again, I don't know. I can only segue by saying more good games. I was playing because Jono had done the review of Murder by Numbers. Again, video team took on playing it for video coverage so we could get that lovely video review out, which I'm pretty happy with. I got to put it together, edit it, and I got to play the game. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think so too.
This is my first experience with Picross.
Do you enjoy it?
I do so far. It's interesting. So I've only gone through the first case. I just started the second one, and I do like the twists because I don't know. I was really concerned because there's two people I found they were very heavy-handed about, and I was like, it's got to be one of these two, but I don't know. And then there was a sufficient twist to make me go like, okay, I was actually going away from what I thought that was, and now it was that. Okay, cool. So the writing is compelling. They do a good job of kind of misleading, and also with the setup of everyone's personalities to put a good few motives out there, which was great. But I find the writing quick and snappy and compelling. I like you get some of the choices. I don't know if those really influence things story-wise. Doesn't really seem like it. Like when you get a choice in the dialogue to be like, oh, what about,
No, it doesn't.
my contract or whatever, for example, really early on.
Yeah, it's a solid visual novel in terms of there's not a whole lot of choice in the matter.
Exactly. But the Picross elements do a nice job of, again, breaking it up in, I would argue, a more fun gameplay loop than Necrobarista. But I also get what you were saying in your review about how sometimes it feels like you're doing it just for the sake of doing it. Like it.
Yeah, occasionally there's something like there'll be a, I don't know, screwdriver on the table and Scout will have to spend 5 minutes to analyze it and figure out what it is, whereas Honor could literally just walk over and be like, oh, it's a screwdriver.
Yeah, and it's just, if they'd done a better job of explaining that, like, Scout needs to do that for Scout's own purpose, like, they need to be scanning things to expand their library and rebuild themselves or whatever that is, then I probably would have bought into it, but it's annoying that it essentially blocks the gameplay from progressing unless you've figured those things out, even though you as the player might be savvy enough to circumvent that needed object or whatever. But then I felt like, I'm like, okay, well, I can't investigate anymore, and I'm not allowed, if I go somewhere else, there's nothing to investigate there. I can't really ask this person questions. I'm showing them everything I got, and it's not really triggering anything. I guess I need to look around the room again. Oh, I found something that probably was there before, but for some reason wasn't. So I guess play some Picross, and now I can progress things. Oh, okay, cool. So I found that was a little strange.
It's also a little bit arbitrary because sometimes the items aren't on the screen. Like they're just not there. So you literally just have to pixel hunt for them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, it would have been arguably too easy if they were there. You'd know exactly where, like, what? I'll look at this interesting looking thing. So I get why that is. It's supposed to be something that, like, isn't just exposed to the naked eye. So that way Scout's purpose of scanning things intricately and picking up things is more of use. But it just seems a little, you got to have a nice little suspension of disbelief to allow yourself to just jump to the, okay, I needed to get this thing, or okay, sure, it wasn't there, but I guess it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the way I justified it to myself is Scout is, a sentient life form, but they are not an iMac. They are not fast. They are a product of the technology of the time. So It will take them a little bit longer to scan a screwdriver. Yeah, so I agree with you about that. I'm curious, because you were a newcomer to Picross, how long was it taking you to solve the puzzles in the first part?
It was some of them could be pretty tricky. Like it depended on the puzzle for me. I mean, I literally could go and look at them because I recorded myself playing some, and there's a few of them where I was like, I thought I'd be a little more snappier with, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm glad I'm not posting this as like a first 30 minutes game, because there'd be people who would be like, really, it took you that long? Because there's a few of them that just I either put something in the wrong place and then I got my rhythm off and I had to go back. Like the Apple one, I had to restart at one point. And it's interesting because when I first exposed myself to the game, it was through Annette, because I was curious how she would like this kind of game, because it's definitely in her wheelhouse of like fun visual puzzles like this and the murder mystery stuff. And so far she seems interested, although again, there's a lot of talking. I want to play the game. There's lots of talking in the beginning.
I note that in the review too. It's especially in later chapters where it can take you up to 15 minutes or more to solve a puzzle. It kills the momentum of the game dead. Or alternatively, you're stuck in the middle of like a giant dialogue section, and you're just like, oh, I kind of wanted to play Picross.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like you can at least let the questioning lead to trying to catch someone a lie or something, or give you something that lets you unlock certain conversation strains, because that's part of the interesting part of, from what I understand, I haven't played enough of it. Ace Attorney, I think, has a bit more of that, where you don't just keep mashing. You don't keep mashing conversation until you eventually get the answer you need to progress the story. Like you actually have to use some like deductive reasoning, don't you?
Yeah, you do, especially in the courtroom sections. But this game replicates the idea of investigating the scenes and trying to find things and questioning the witnesses. But with that game, this game is considerably easier when it comes to figuring out what piece of evidence you need to show them, because there's a limited amount of them. It doesn't feel like a. It doesn't feel like a. I'm trying to figure out how to put this. It doesn't go the full Ace Attorney, I guess. It doesn't do what Ace Attorney does, which is make you feel like you're actually having a conversation. It makes you feel like you're reading dialogue, and you're just being interrupted constantly by little, windows saying, okay, which one of these do I choose? And you're right, choice doesn't really impact this. At least I don't think so.
It gives you the illusion of agency.
Yeah, as a lot of visual novels do.
Oh, also I was going to say, in your review, you mentioned you wish they had put in a reset button. It's true. I was annoyed by that too, because it doesn't present itself as obvious. You have to actually go into like the actual like options menu thing, whatever. Like that actual drop down menu, and that's where it has a restart puzzle, which is weird.
Yeah. Whereas usually it's just like a button on the screen, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I thought that was, I knew what you, just saying, if anyone who has read the review, like there is one, but it's hard to find.
Okay, because I could not find it for the life of me. And also, I firmly think that I'm a little surprised that it's actually not out on iOS or any like touchscreen, because I feel like this game specifically would be a wonderful title to have on touchscreens, because certain games are made for touchscreens, and puzzle games like this or visual novels usually work very well.
Did you? Because I'm doing it I was playing it on PC. Were you doing it on Switch when you did your review?
No, I was also on PC.
Okay, because I'm wondering if it has the touch controls on the Switch.
It probably does, but even then, Switch isn't, at least in my opinion, Switch is not the ideal touchscreen method possible. Like, if I was to play this game, I would totally be playing it on my iPad with my Apple Pencil.
Yeah. I guess that brings us to the end of another episode.
It does.
Everybody. You can find us on, rpgfan.com. Go check out that nice fancy new site. But we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram as @rpgfancom. You can find us on Facebook, and we are on Twitch with Scott and the team through all kinds of fun games. And if you want to email myself, Jono, the podcast as a whole, you can email us at podcast@rpgfan.com. We've had some good listener mail over the past few weeks, and I would like to take some more, see what people are saying about things. And then, of course, you can listen to all our other lovely podcasts. We have Retro Encounter, which has some really fun episodes that are kind of topical to what we were talking about today in terms of Mario and such, that you've already started listening to by the time this is aired. The Superstar Saga, they played that out. You've got Hat and Eric with the Phoenix Edge podcast, which is keeping up with current events. And then finally, Rhythm Encounter. You can listen to back episodes of that and listen to some great video game music. Otherwise, there's not too much else to really plug. For myself, for Jono, for John, for Zach, thank you so much for being here, fellows. Thanks for joining me once again on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. It's always a blast.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. We will, we'll have you all back again soon. Bye for now.
Later.
Adios.
Bye.